the bridge or over the bridge. You've got to learn to use open questions when dealing with these kinds of situations. And open questions are the ones that begin with how or what. Things that are a process question, not like what's your name, but what do you think about that? Something that's going to cause them to think and help clarify the problem and actually identify what this individual or this group of individuals actually wants. A good trick for this is paraphrasing for confirmation. So when they're talking to you, listen to clues about the cause of what the conflict is, and you can confirm your understanding by paraphrasing what you've heard. It makes them feel that they're actually being heard. You may not agree with it, but they're being heard. And this is one of the tricks of active listening. Use active listening techniques such as paraphrasing or labeling emotions, effective pauses, open-ended questions, and validation to enhance and to advance that conversation. You need to explore options. You need to acknowledge that person's reality and then ask yourself the what if question. What if I did this? What if this happened? Oh, what if, I see. These are problem solving questions that introduce options into the conversation. And once you have options on the table, then you can have an open discussion. One thing that we don't tend to do is examine the consequences as appropriate. If you got one of these difficult people, you need to ask that person to articulate the consequences of a specific action. For example, tell me what happened when this was called, or tell me why you think the caller is making it hard for you. If you can't examine the consequence of what's making them be a difficult person, you haven't got to the source of what the problem is. And finally, you need to be able to agree on action steps and timeframes. In asking for confirmation, then rephrase what that individual is saying by saying something like, quick paraphrase, is that right? Do I understand you correctly? That way they know they're being heard, what they're saying is getting out, and you're actually taking an interest. So now they're more able to listen and they're more open to listening to your point of view, not just spouting yours. So that's just a very, very quick review of some active communication principles, and we've talked about those before. So when we deal with these difficult people, especially as a caller, we have to think that, it's natural to gravitate towards those relationships that bring us the most happiness and growth and fulfillment. And pretty much that's why we became callers in the first place. That's why we square dance. However, in square dancing, just as in life, despite our best efforts and intentions to the contrary, we're going to be forced to deal with challenges in relationships and difficult people. And navigating those interactions can often result in stress, tension, anxiety, and all those things that negatively impact your mood and expose you to unpleasant emotional toxicity if it's poorly handled. And it will leave you with not only a bad feeling, but it could also leave others with a very bad impression of you if you don't deal with it properly. So when dealing with difficult people, it's important to remember that everyone you encounter is doing the best they can from their own level of consciousness. Okay, that's their perception. That's why it's so important to try and avoid judging their behavior. No matter how hard it is, no matter how it may appear from your perspective, few, if any, of these really difficult people that come into square dancing are deliberately trying to be the bad guy or the villain. They're simply making the choices that seem best for them from where they find themselves at that current moment, regardless of the amount of mayhem that it may be bringing to others and bringing into the experience of others. Every one of us as a dancer or as a caller or as a teacher or as a coach has had to deal with that difficult situation that is instigated by one individual or individuals that have a different opinion from you or are not impressed by something you've said or you've done. They think that they're better informed or more knowledgeable than you, and they want to prove it, not just to you, but to everyone. One thing that happens a lot, they're jealous or they're afraid of what you are or what you may become as a caller because, suddenly you're better than them. There's hundreds of reasons like this. And you also have to take into account that sometimes people are just asses. There's nothing you can do about it. That's just the way some people are. And if you can identify these kinds of things, you'll know how to recognize them. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So what's the secret? The secret of dealing with difficult people is actually quite easy. The first and most important lesson is to ask yourself 4 questions quickly before you respond. Somebody's created a situation or giving you a hard time, just take a moment, ask yourself these 4 questions. What just happened? You've got to distinguish observations from evaluations. You've got to, okay, what am I seeing? Not judging. Okay, I've got to be aware and I've got to be clear of just what happened. Then you've got to identify, what are these feelings that are arising in me? Taking responsibility for emotions and your beliefs without slipping into that victimization role that a lot of us do. Okay, if you don't recognize your own feelings and you're not able to deal with them, you cannot diffuse a situation. It's impossible. You've also got to identify, what do I need? This is you talking to yourself. What do I need that I'm not receiving? You've got to identify your own needs rather than assuming others' needs automatically know, and rather than assuming others might automatically know what you need in this kind of a situation. It's a very important skill when you're faced with a conflict situation. You have to say, what do I need to make myself feel good about this situation? And you have to ask, what am I actually asking for? Specifically formulating a request for what you need, and then you've got to surrender that outcome. And that's a hard thing to do, is what do I need? And then I've got to get rid of it. I've got to put it aside for a minute. And it's the simple process of achieving your own introspection to deal with this situation. And you've got to start by looking inside yourself, not reacting to what's happened. And that's the difficult part. Okay. A couple of easy tools to deal with that. I use the STOP acronym. Okay. This is a model that's used to avoid reactivity. Okay. The acronym is the most fundamental step in coping with difficult people. And what it stands for is, oh, here's a difficult people. He's right in your face. Stop what you're doing. Okay. Just stop for a second. Don't have that knee-jerk reaction, that automatic, okay, I want to punch this guy in the face, or I want to argue with him, or just tell him he's wrong. Just stop for a second. Take 3 deep breaths. Force yourself to do that. That allows you to center yourself. You know, people say count to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4. And some people do that out loud. It doesn't help. Just take 3 deep breaths, center yourself. That pause allows you time to ask those 4 questions. You've got to observe, how do you feel? How does your body feel? Are your ears burning? Are you angry? Are you embarrassed? Because if you don't recognize how you feel, you can't control your own response. And if you can't control your response, you've already lost this. You've got to proceed with kindness and compassion. And that is usually the hardest thing to do, because most of the time the conflict needing resolution is embarrassing. It's hurtful. It might even be belittling to you. And you've got to say, I can move past this to deal with the situation. Because there is only one thing that you have control of. No matter how challenging that difficult person or that difficult relationship is, that pause is going to help derail the emotional reaction that's primed to take over you in that heat of the moment. And the only thing you have control of is your own reaction. So that's step 1, stop. Step 2 is see through what we call the control dramas. Now, control dramas are manipulative behaviors that people often fall into when their needs aren't being met. And there's really 4 primary control dramas, and you can recognize these when you hear them. It's seeing them in people. It's difficult. The first is being nice and manipulative. Oh, that's really, really great. I love the way you call that. You know, oh, it's great. You could probably do this, this, and this. The person wants you to workshop something that you didn't really want to workshop, but they're being so nice and they're manipulating you into a corner where you got to do something that they want, even if you didn't want to do it. There's being nasty and manipulative. You don't know what, you know, I was dancing to Don Beck the other day, and he was calling this thing. There's no way you're even anywhere in his category. Well, in my case, that's true. There's no way I'm in his category, but the person doesn't have to be nasty to manipulate me into trying to do something. There's being aloof and withdrawn. The person just becomes standoffish, doesn't want to talk to you, or you become standoffish and don't want to talk to them. And then there's playing the victim of, oh, poor me. Oh, I can't do that. I'm too old. I can't do, oh, I don't think the way I had a rough day. Oh, poor me. It's the Eeyore syndrome. Now, if you can learn to recognize what's happening with the person that's causing the conflict, you're going to have an insight in how to deal with that person and how to best approach the situation. These 4 control dramas, you have to remember, are learned, and people have learned them in childhood, and that the person causing the issue has learned to rely on these control dramas, their favorite control drama, because it's been successful for them in dealing with their own needs. Most people will never outgrow their primary control drama impulses, and when the pressure gets up, they revert back to their learned form. As a caller, When you witness one of these control dramas playing out in a difficult person, you can automatically become more understanding. Imagine that person you're dealing with using the same control drama as a child. Oh, this is how I dealt with my mother when I didn't get my way or I didn't get my favorite toy. Once you take that perspective, you realize that this individual never learned another way to get their needs met, and as such is deserving of your compassion, not your pity, but your compassion. The simple and profound shift in your perspective takes this relationship dynamic into an entirely new and generally a positive direction. One of the hard things, somebody comes up to you and starts belittling you or putting you down, don't take it personally. Step 3, don't take it personally. Even if it's a personal attack on you, because if you do, you've lost before you started. Now, in all sorts of life situations, you can walk away from that. In a calling situation, you can't always walk away, and there are going to be situations where somebody's going to come up and have a deliberate go at you. When you're involved in with a difficult person, it can feel like their words are a deliberate personal attack. This is most often not the case. Their reaction and behavior is not about you. You've got to remember that. It's not about you. It's about them. Everyone is experiencing their reality through their own personalized filters, their own perceptions, and their own experiences of the world. And how they see you behave is going to be a direct result of those interpretations that they have. A difficult person's point of view is something that is very personal to them. And in their reality, they're the director, they're the producer, and they're the leading actor of their own movie. You on the receiving end, you're only playing a small role in their drama. So take that and turn it around. In a similar manner, they're possibly only bit players in your drama. So you can choose not to give that bit player of your life control over your happiness. If you take the situation personally, you end up becoming offended, and then you react by defending your beliefs or your position or causing additional conflict. In refusing to take things personally, what you do is you diffuse the ego and you help de-escalate difficult conversations and get rid of that potential conflict. There's a thing called defenselessness, and this is probably the hardest thing to do, especially if the person causing the drama is obviously wrong. And that happens a lot. Now, but being defenseless is a powerful strategy when confronted with a difficult person. But you got to remember, being defenseless does not mean being passive or means that you're passive. Okay, you still maintain your personal opinion and your perspective in a difficult situation. But rather than engaging with the intention of making the other person wrong and you right, you consciously choose not to be an adversary of their negativity. Being defenseless means you've got to give up the need to be the smartest person in the room, even if you are. And it's hard because callers are all about ego. And it's a necessary thing to have as a successful caller, is you have to have an ego. However, in this kind of a situation, it's important to tell both your ego and your intellect to go and sit down while you proceed accepting that that other person's position is just as valid as yours from their point of view. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just a valid opinion. And you don't have to agree with their perspective or even like it. You only need to be able to acknowledge it. It's imperative that your first reaction when somebody does this to you is not defend your point of view without acknowledging the value of their point of view, whether it's right or wrong. An interaction with a difficult person should never turn into a heated debate or worse, into an argument. In most cases, that person just needs to be heard in full so that perspective is validated, so that their perspective is validated. If you allow them to express themselves without resistance, you become defenseless in that aspect. They can fulfill that need, and perhaps they're going to become more amicable. Establishing defenselessness creates that space between you that allows for a more compassionate and a more peaceful interaction. And it also opens that door for effective communication. And once you've got that door to communication open, you've got the ability to change a point of view or to expand a point of view, or you may even find out, hey, maybe I was wrong. Step 5, sometimes you just got to walk away. There's nothing wrong with that. Difficult people can often draw you into this field of negativity. And if you feel like you can't maintain your awareness or your objectivity, there's nothing wrong with just removing yourself from the situation. but you've got to do it in the right way. A toxic exchange can leave you feeling physically depleted and emotionally exhausted. And if the above options that we've talked about already aren't helping, just walk away. You don't have anything to prove, and there's no need to martyr yourself in this kind of a situation. You may have the best intentions for the exchange, such as correcting an error in the person's perception or helping them become a better dancer. But sometimes the best course is just to acknowledge their opinion. Okay, I think I understand your point of view, and then find a subtle way to withdraw from the interaction. Get out of that entirely. It isn't about winning or losing. It's about stepping away from the situation that could not only bring you down, but also bring down the entire mood of the evening. One of the best tricks to have for that is business cards. They're great. Make a reason to disengage. That says, you know what? I hear what you're saying. I need to talk to you about that further because I really want to hear your point of view. Here's my business card. Can you send me an email and we can open up a dialogue, but I've got to get back up on the stage and call right now. Or it's really simple to say, if I did something wrong, please let me know. I can fix it. Send me an email. I'll get back to you, but I have to get ready for the next step. You validated that their opinion exists and it matters to them, but you haven't engaged them in discussion on it, and you've walked away from the situation. Now they're going, okay, that person was listening. It was just time crunch. And they'll back off 9 times out of 10 anyway. You've got to see these kinds of experiences as learning opportunities, learning to evolve within yourself. Dealing with a difficult person is a learning experience each and every time it happens. And if you can recognize what really irritates you about the person, you may also be able to recognize it might be a reflection of yourself, and what you see in them is sometimes upsetting because that's what you see in yourself. Life is a very good teacher, and a difficult person is only part of that class and another lesson to master. So try and ask yourself in these situations, what am I meant to learn here? What am I trying to be taught? What's life teaching me? And if you do figure something like that out, write it down and keep it in notes. It's really great because as you evolve, go back and read some of those notes. Sometimes you realize, oh man, well, I could have said this, I could have said that, I could have done this, I could have done that better. And it is a learning evolutionary experience. Step 7, this is the hardest one, compassion. You've got to resonate compassion. You got to be compassionate in understanding. And with difficult people, compassion allows you to see someone who is suffering and needs relief. Doesn't matter how big of a dick that person is, they need relief. And if you can think, speak, and act from this perspective, you will resonate that compassion, not necessarily for them, but for their position and their perspective. Okay, and that's an important distinction. It's not for them necessarily, but it's for their position and their perspective. Doing that allows you to respond reflectively rather than reactively, and hopefully take that relationship between you to a more conscious level of communication and expression. Try and remember it this way. Each and every one of us does the best we can with what we know. And when we know better, we do better. This applies to your perspective and theirs, whether they know it or not. And you notice up there, I have empathy, not sympathy. If you can say to somebody, I understand your point of view. You don't feel what they feel. You don't feel their anger. You don't feel that, but you can understand their point of view. Empathy is a good thing. Sympathy is not. There's an old expression in the military, sympathy belongs to that 4-letter S word and syphilis in the dictionary, and that's the only place you find it. But having emotional intelligence and emotional strength, empathy will open that door. And showing that you understand their point of view almost diffuses 90% of your situations. We talk a lot about the sociability of square dancing. Okay, and as a caller, we definitely talk about the sociability of square dancing and the importance that sociability is in relationship building. Just remember that the relationship is between 2 entities. It's you and the dancers. That relationship is then extended to the relationship between you and the club, you and the club and the dancers, and you and each individual dancer. It's a whole melange of relationships. And to suffice it to say that you are at the center of every communication action that happens on the floor where calling is part of the equation. As such, you are the commonality that's going to make or break a successful outcome to conflict resolution. So there's 15 steps, and these are learned steps. I learned this when I was becoming a behavioral consultant. I learned this in the military. I taught this when I was teaching attachés to go out and deal with conflict resolution and teaching soldiers. And it's just as applicable in every life skill as it is being a square dance caller. Number one is kindness. Okay. Look, I get it. When you're dealing with a difficult person, your gut reaction is to be difficult right back. When it feels like somebody's coming up and attacking you, your first thought is to defend yourself. I've been there. And sometimes I still get caught up when I don't slow down and take that pause. I have to think about it, and it's hard. Almost every difficult situation, when confronted with kindness, however, goes a lot further than being difficult. Conflict requires two people, and it requires two people being difficult with each other. The situation tends to escalate to a point where nothing gets accomplished. But kindness with a difficult person most of the time will diffuse that situation, and you end up getting more of what you want. This is the number one top technique for dealing with difficult people. Just show a little kindness. Two is compassion. Have you ever heard the saying about dealing with your own problems? That if you take a bunch of people and you shoved all your problems in a circle, you'd most likely take back all your own once you saw everybody else's. The point is, none of us really know what somebody else is dealing with or going through, or what their experience has brought them, and why they have that perspective that is the issue of this conflict. Most often, if you show a little compassion to that person who's being difficult, you'll find that they can't help but respond back to you in a positive manner. So we need to open our eyes and see what other people need, that little bit of kindness. In square dancing, this is easy. Find common ground. Build that connectivity, okay? Have you ever noticed when you met somebody or talking to somebody for the first time, finding something in common creates a strong initial connection, okay? We all love to feel like we're part of a group, like we belong. That's why we square dance. This is a great expert technique to deal with difficult people, and one you should keep in the top of your mind. It's especially important when you as a caller are challenged, or you're in a situation dealing with a dancer or another caller. If you can find that common ground that's already there for you to build on, you've got a foot in the door already to open communication. And when you're able to state an understanding of the person causing conflict and can express empathy from a point of knowledge to understanding their situation, it makes it much easier to have a smooth conversation rather than having an argument. Number four, stay calm. Most of the time you're going to say, or let's put it the other way around. Most of the time, somebody's going to say or do something to you at a dance that's going to alter your mood. It's going to cause your ears to burn. It's going to cause you to see red. And this has happened to me several times. It's frustrating and it's infuriating. It's even more so that when that person only seems to be intentionally making it more difficult for you. Just remember, responding in kind is only going to make it worse, not better. So if you can, find the patience to stay calm and wait a little while for responding, because the results are much better. Remember that STOP acronym? T, take 3 deep breaths. That gives you that little pause. The ability to stay calm when dealing with a difficult person is going to help you greatly. Once you get there, you've got to share your side. Don't tell them what it is. Don't tell them what you think. Share your side. Listen to theirs, share your side. It's important to listen to their side, but once you've acknowledged the value of their perception, not agreement, but the value of their perception, they're going to be more inclined to listen. And sometimes being able to articulate to a difficult person where you're coming from is going to make a big, big difference. Whatever you do, however, do not script a standard response. A lot of people do this and it just creates a bigger problem. When presenting your perspective of a conflict situation, putting into a context relative to that specific situation and that specific perception will sometimes make a huge difference. A scripted response doesn't. This is where empathy, never sympathy, goes a long way in communication. Respect. What it says there is no respect equals no communication, and that is absolutely true. Nobody likes to be treated as if they're stupid or incompetent or just plain wrong. And when dealing with even the most difficult person, treat them with respect, no matter how difficult it is. It goes a long way to diffusing a situation, but also doing so will raise your profile, their perception of you, and their perception of that person and any others that are around, how you deal with the situation. You're going to say, wow, how did he maintain his cool on that? Oh, wow, look at the solution he found. We've never been able to deal with that guy before, and he did that very quickly. But if you start attacking someone and acting like they're stupid, you might as well be slamming the door shut on the conflict. And that's, likely slamming the door shut on ever being asked to come back and call again. Okay. If you treat someone disrespectfully, no matter how right you are, no matter how big a problem they are, it will almost always make things worse. And at a bare minimum, that other person will not want to do anything to assist you in resolving this conflict. It's the same, it's the golden rule. Treat others like you want to be treated, and that is with respect. Ignore them. Yeah, I said it. Rarely, but sometimes there are people that just want to be out for the negative. They're just looking to be negative, and they want somebody else to feel worse so they can feel better about themselves. I don't need that in my life. I don't need that at my dance, and neither does anyone else. And sometimes the best course of action with a difficult person is just to ignore them or avoid them. As I said earlier, give them their business card and walk away. Okay. In some cases, it may even be worth the effect or the effort of letting them know how kindly, let me rephrase it, letting them know in a kind way that their needs could be better served elsewhere or with a different activity, and let them know they could probably find someone else who could assist them in the way that they're wanting. Square dancing might not be the option for them. Okay. Control. This isn't just about you. You've got to control yourself, and you've got to control the situation. And there's a lot of things in life that we can control, and there's a lot more things that we cannot. You can only focus on that which you have control over. This is especially true with difficult people. You may or you may not be able to control that person that comes up to you with a technical, "You're wrong." You can, however, control getting a group together with that person and saying, "Maybe we don't know all there is to know about this movement. Let's all get together and, okay, explain your point of view. Let's have a look at it. Let's all do it." And that way they think, the person being difficult thinks they're helping and they're in control, when in reality you are. And this opens up the communication. It allows you to open up that avenue to a correct perspective. And who knows, sometimes that confronting personality might actually be right, and you might learn something. It does happen. I think I just did control, didn't I? Okay. You've got to look at yourself. Take a good hard look at yourself in a conflict situation. Is there something that you're doing that's making it hard to deal with someone else? What about your own mood? If you're in a good mood, you interact with people all day and it's all going well. However, what about those times when you have your own problems that you're trying to sort out? I had to call a big dance one night. I was going out to the dance and my wife left me that night. I still went and did the dance, but I was not in a good mood. Okay. If it's serious enough, you can be seen as short, you can be seen as abrupt, or you can even be seen as condescending. It's important that you spend a lot of time in your own head when dealing with conflict with others. If you don't, your mood or how you present it, even if you do all the right things, are just going to add fuel to the fire of conflict and make things worse. And worse, if you've got that kind of a mood, conflict or negativity will project negativity back at you. And then it just escalates. You've got to take a good hard look at yourself. A hard one is don't be afraid of conflict. Okay, most people are naturally afraid of conflict, and this leads to letting difficult people usually having their way, or worse, people walking all over you or the club or the situation. It's very hard to be a leader from under the sole of somebody else's shoe. It's important that when you're challenged, that you do stand up for yourself, but you also establish boundaries. Everyone, including you, deserves to be treated with respect. Don't allow yourself to be treated poorly by a difficult person. However, don't start conflict, but don't fear it either, especially if that difficult person is treating you poorly. It only reflects badly on them, not you. Conflict is not necessarily a bad thing, and in many instances, it's a good thing because it allows a resolution to come to fruition. Okay? Don't be afraid of conflict. That's what opens discussion, different points of view. What you do is as important as what you say. I put eye contact on here. Okay, you've got to choose to make eye contact or choose not to make eye contact. And for that, you've got to do your homework. Making eye contact with the person you're speaking face to face with is an outward expression that you're confident, you're fully engaged with that person, what they're thinking and what they're presenting to you. However, if someone isn't looking to make eye contact with you, before you jump to that conclusion, be aware that in some places it's culturally unacceptable for them not to make eye contact, it's not acceptable for them to look you in the eye. It's just not an acceptable thing. You're in command, so they don't look you in the eye, but they can still be very, very negative and cause a lot of conflict. It could be they're intimidated by you, or it just makes them uncomfortable. Be aware of this. And this goes into body language, okay? You can project confidence, kindness, and leadership just by the way you carry yourself. You got your head up, you got your shoulders back, you got your chest out, but somebody's talking, tilt your head, nod, acknowledgement, and understanding when they're speaking to you. You're not agreeing with them. You're only acknowledging with your body language that you're interested in what they're saying to you. Learn a little bit about facial expressions and body language, because by looking for things that are a sudden change from the normal in a person's body language, you quickly pick up on their feelings or reactions to what they're saying, or them to what their reactions to what you're saying. Number 14 is to praise people's strengths. Actually, number 13 is to praise people's strengths. I got these numbered wrong. Okay. It's really, really hard to cause conflict if you're being praised by someone. Okay? Giving praise to someone else, especially in a conflict situation, is a sign of confidence on your part. It's also a tremendous builder of confidence in the other person. And that confidence is, oh, that guy knows what he's talking about. He understands that, I do know what I'm talking. I am good in something like this. Or, I may have an issue, but I'm good elsewhere. Maybe I got something to learn. You've given them a compliment about their strengths. And it might be something completely different of what they want to raise the conflict about, but it's hard to be angry or hard to build conflict when somebody's saying something nice about you. It means you might actually see them better than they may be seeing themselves at that particular moment. Now, like looking at body language, listen to the voice, not just the words that are being said. There's a lot of studies out on this, but what's important to remember is people communicate much more with the tone of their voice than they will with the words themselves. And part of the key of conflict resolution is knowing that information is revealed differently. People really reveal a lot about themselves, not only by what they say, but by how they say it and what they do when they say it. And some people connect better when you speak loud and fast. Others prefer to be communicated in a softer tone. The ideal is to know your audience. And you've got to understand that the words we use is only 7% of what we're actually saying. Words have meaning, but a very small part of meaning. You add a tone of voice to that, now you've got 38% communication. Okay, that's a total of 45% of the communication just from the words we use, 7%, and the tone of voice, 38%. It says what we want to express. The other 55% is what we do while we're saying that. Our facial expressions, our eyes, our actions, what we're doing. Take the example, 2 words, the word it's and the word raining. It's raining. What does that actually say? If I say it's raining, I've suddenly changed the whole meaning. It's a question. Oh, am I curious? Am I surprised? How about if it's raining? Same 2 words, but now my body's shrunk. I've hit the table. I'm showing frustration. I'm upset about the conditions of the weather. I've communicated so much more by what I'm doing than just the words I'm using. You've got to be able to look for those. Okay. Smile and be polite. Okay. You really got to do that. People that smile are generally more accepted and confident. It shows that you're in a good mood. Tell your face to smile. In your body, physiologically, you trigger what's called mirror neurons. They're the happy feelings. And these mirror neurons are triggered in others, and it forces them to smile. And it's really, really hard to argue with a smile on your face. People with great social skills are approachable, and nothing says better, let's be friends, more than a genuine smile. Similarly, words like please, thank you, you're welcome are respectful, and they're free, and they go a long way to diffusing a situation. But you've got to be genuine with them and use them often. Make them part of you. Okay? And the last one, you've got to provide value. In any conflict resolution situation, it's important that you provide value, because if you can't get out of the situation, sorry, let's rephrase that. If you can't provide value, you can't get out of the situation. It's that simple. This means that you have a fairly good social skill, and you've got to have it to be able to provide something of value to the person causing the situation, whether that value is understanding or clarification without getting anything in return. You've got to give and not get. And that's the joy of Christmas. You know, it's giving, it's giving, not getting. If you can do that, then sometimes, if you can't do that, then sometimes it's necessary just to listen and say nothing at all. In a number of conflict situations, people don't need to hear your opinion, and nor do they want it. They just want to be heard. Remember that the next time you want to chime in and give that empirical data supporting your side of the argument. You know, stop and ask yourself the question, do I want to be happy or do I want to be right? More times than not, being happy means conceding the argument, not right or wrong, just conceding the argument and enjoying the company of others. Accept their opinion with a positive note and go elsewhere. You know, I didn't realize that causing that would cause you trouble. I'll have a look into that. Thank you. And walk away. You know, you validated their opinion that they had trouble with what you called. You acknowledged their worth and you acknowledged the validity of their opinion. You didn't agree with it. I'll have a look into it and walk away. Okay. Their opinion was heard, but you're not going to deal with it. I don't need that crap in my life. Neither does anybody else at the dance. Conflict situations like this are going to arise all the time. They can be very contagious. They can be detrimental to an overall mood or an atmosphere. And it's even worse if it gets to you, because you will spread it quickly. You do not want to be that person that transmits somebody else's negativity or your own by extension through that microphone. And if you're faced with it, then you're going to be the person who ends up finding the upside of a difficult situation and keeping it all in perspective. Don't be unrealistic and don't be overly positive, but be the person that looks at a conflict with a difficult person and focuses on what you can control to diffuse the situation. So when a situation arises, ask yourself, am I the cause? And as a caller, if the problem is danceability, choreography, definitions, flow, or any other aspect of something that happened at that dance while you were calling, the answer is yes, you are the problem. Now, before you start to argue about that, let's set your own opinion and ego aside for a minute and look at this from a different perspective. This is the hardest thing to accept because it's important to be introspective at yourself. Many times we deal with a difficult person because it's something that we have done knowingly or inadvertently that has caused a reaction which has escalated to a conflict situation. And I'll use the old classic example here. You're at a dance and things are going well and you're having a really good, solid mainstream program, lots of variety, everything's going good, the dancers are comfortable and happy, and you finish your patter caller by saying, heads face grand square. And a dancer stops right there in the middle of the huff, waits to the end of the music, and before you can put that singing call on, he goes up the stage and yells at you, called that wrong. It's not heads face, it's sides face grand square. Okay. Now, is that dancer correct in feeling the anxiety of you calling? Did you call it wrong? In that dancer's mind, the answer is probably yes. But that's not your fault. You were the cause of the reaction by calling something. Right or wrong doesn't matter. What matters is how you're now going to deal with this situation. You were the only one that delivered this message, and it was a message that this dancer has been trained to think is wrong. Is your choreography wrong? No. Is the movement wrong? No. Did you get the definition wrong? No. Are you wrong to call it? No. Are you the cause of this dancer's anxiety? Yes, but you didn't create the circumstances for it. So once you learn to accept ownership, then you can get to the issue of diffusing the situation. And in order to do that, you've got to recognize that only you have control of one thing. You only have control of your own reactions. You have no control of the simple facts. You have no control that the dancer thinks he or she is right. This dancer doesn't understand the definition. You have no control of that. The dancer may or may not have been taught right. You had no control of that. This dancer may have been specifically told it's sides, face, grand square. I know dancers have been told that recycle is always girls turn back, wheel and deal. That's it. That's the only way it's danced. Okay. This dancer also doesn't care about the public perception of him or herself as long as their point can be pressed. And this dancer also likes to be the center or the focus of attention. None of that you have control over. What you do have control over is how you react and how you deal with the situation. So what's our natural tendency? We want to correct. Remember, stop, take 3 breaths, figure out what's going in, look at it, go through that process. So very quickly, this is the summary of these 10 conflict resolution criteria. 1, you've got to validate. You'd be surprised what this simple action can do. One common reason that people put up resistance is because they don't feel heard or understood. And validating and listening to them to make them feel significant is the fastest way to move forward. It's not agreement with their position, only acknowledgement of the value of their opinion. Try and think like them. Just imagine you're in their shoes for a moment. What do they want? If you were in that situation that they have with their experience, what would you feel like? Just that one thing will get you very, very far in conflict resolution, because most people are only seeing things from their own point of view. Perception is reality. And for most people, it's a great problem solver that changes perspective. If you can change somebody's perspective, you can change their reality. Don't resist. What you resist persists. Okay? People tend to resist more when you resist them. And if you tell them, somebody comes up and says, sorry, you're wrong, it can be done that way. Well, even if it's true, you've already likely lost this conflict, because I came up and had a problem and I'm saying I want to deal with this. Now you're wrong, go away. How would you feel? Spend a little extra time getting to know their point of view and ask questions to understand their point of view, and nod your head yes, or tilt your head as if you understand. This brings us to the head tilt, a very, very powerful tool. When we communicate not only through words, but body language, we communicate with body language. Remember that. And when you tilt your head slightly, people feel heard. Also, it causes you to actually listen more intently, because you're actually, oh yeah, you automatically do it. Try and plan your outcome. Before communicating, remember that stop principle? Stop and think about how you want to feel as a result of what you're about to discuss. Usually what you want is relief, okay? And that you also want this problem child to go away. However, it's important that you know how you want to make them feel, and that's validated. And finally, you must be flexible, just like you want them to be. So you got to plan your outcome of what you want to do at the end of this conflict. Try and remember, what is the lesson? Most of the time, there's a much bigger life lesson to be learned from the situation, especially when people are being difficult. And it could be showing you how to relate to people in general, or how you're actually the one creating the conflict, or what conflict triggers in you. You know, they may have said something that, oh, you know what, when people say that to me, my ears burn, I get real defensive. Okay, be open to those lessons, note them down, and be bigger than the situation is itself, because most conflict situations, especially at square dancing, are very, very small, and they're not that important in the grand scheme of things. Some of them can be. Use strategic influence. Remember getting that group of people together? Find out who influences this difficult person and see if they can help you relate to them. Think outside the box and recognize that you've got many routes that are going to lead you to where you want to go. Oh, they had an issue with this move. Okay, well, let's get a square together and look at, oh, okay, I can see how you misunderstood what I was saying. You're absolutely right. Let's walk through this. This is what I was trying to get. Everybody's there. They're not going to contradict 7 other people, especially if they're the ones that influence this guy. Try and create a bond with that person. Sometimes this can be by changing the subject and agreeing on something totally different than the matter at hand, just to create that bond. Sometimes even a negative bond might do the trick, but be careful. Do not make a habit of negative bonding. But if you find something to agree on that's positive, then you can you've brought the conversation and the difficult situation up to a positive note, then you can start communicating. Downplay the situation. It's really, really hard when somebody comes up to you with a real strong negative or in your face. You're wrong. You can't call that. That's not done that way. Don't feed that negativity. Big responses are like saying something and somebody writes that long email, and all it does is escalate a difficult situation. You don't want to do that in a hall full of people. You don't want to call out that person's behavior with a grand reply. No, you're wrong. Hey, listen, everybody. Joe Bloggins here says you can't do heads, face, grand square. What do you think about that? Well, guess what? You've just escalated that situation and you become the drama queen and you look like an idiot. You're not going to get asked back. Instead, calmly listen and listen with care. That person won't feel defensive, but they will generally feel understood, even if they're wrong, and then they'll be open to listening. Number 10, and this is an important one, interrupt the pattern. Once you recognize that people have these dramas and their control dramas that they fall back on, if you can find the ability to interrupt that pattern, it goes a long way. And it's a very important skill. People often behave like robots, and we get triggered all the time. And we're often reacting to a story that we loop in our heads with a behavior pattern that we developed as a child and that has worked for us. So when you're dealing with somebody difficult, their chances are they're going to always have the same or a similar pattern. And if you can interrupt that pattern by asking a question completely off topic, what it does, it upsets their mental story that they're playing in their head. And you can approach the situation more proactively than defensively. Okay, so that's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Oh, where's my question slide? My question slide's gone. Anyway, that's the essence. Now, that's a session that I have given and I've modified, but I've given that to attaches. I've given that to workers in the environment. I've given that to rangers. I've given that to police officers. We've dealt with conflict resolution situations across the board. And as a behavior consultant, those are the things that happen in every life situation. But it's something that we as callers don't spend enough time on, because we as callers are the people that generally are not only the person that causes the conflict for whatever reason. You can't call that. I never learned it that way. But we're also the people that get called on to resolve difficult situations. One of them that we've had recently was actually the demise of a club. There was one person who was there. I dealt with him at a dance, not a problem. And the rest of the dance was good. But he kept coming back to the dance. Sometimes he was drunk. Sometimes he was belligerent. He did not know how to dance. He insisted on getting up on the floor, even though they had new dancers and they had mainstream dancers. He didn't know how to dance. And when he says, oh, you're not ready for this, I paid my money to come and dance. And eventually what happened, a lot of the dancers left, went to other clubs. The remaining dancers ended up taking out an AVO, that's an apprehended violence order, to make sure that he couldn't come to the club. He came anyway, and the club folded. And when I moved down here to take over the club, well, guess what? The club no longer existed. Sometimes it can escalate because they didn't know how to, and all they did was confront this person. You know, you can't do that. If you're going to be like that, leave. Well, I paid my money. And when it got to that point, you've already lost the argument. I've had a few discussions with callers recently about issues with other callers, issues with mentors. And that's a really, really sad thing. It's one of the saddest things that I've ever heard, is when another caller will go up to a new caller that's learning, or another caller, and this is an actual situation, but the new caller is presenting at a dance, up on stage, asking, trying out the pattern, and their mentor lifted the needle and said, you're not ready to call yet, and took the mic away from him. How embarrassing for that guy. He never came back. There's other issues where callers just make it very difficult for new callers. And I'm sure we've all had that situation. So let's open up this with heads, face, grand square. You can't call it. How would you deal with that?
Let me interrupt. Am I? Yeah.
Sorry, Don, I get carried away with that.
Yeah, this one's mine to MC and ask for questions. I know we all have a lot of things we disagree with what Mel said, so let's take 3 deep breaths and then we'll start the conversation. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Actually, Mel, that was really good. There's a lot of things that I wish I'd heard earlier, like 40 years ago. I haven't had too many bad conflicts, but you've presented a lot of things. They went by quickly. I'm hoping you will make the slides available.
I will make the slides and the text. I'm going to be emailing those to Dan so they can go up on the website, and I'll email them to Mark as well.
That would be great, because that's going to be a quicker way to review and let them soak in than watching this again. To those people that are watching the video, my apologies that the first half minute or so I forgot to record. I said I was about to record, and then somebody distracted me, and I noticed a minute or two later that I actually started. Mark, I think you started recording before I did. Um, but actually, it's close enough to the hour that let's do the formal bit and then get on with some of the discussion. First of all, thank you guys for coming. Um, we mentioned in the pre-session that there's likely to be fewer people here because there's an Australian National Convention, because there's the New England Square Dance Convention, because NEFA, the New England Folk Festival, is on this weekend, um, and at least 3 of our Swedish regulars were all together and said hello and then had to go because they were doing some caller training and dancing for newer callers. So we have a smaller group, but I'm sure they're going to watch the video. You guys that were here, thank you for coming. Yeah, after a 2-week break, I had to figure out how to do this as well as the hosting part. And I especially want to thank Mel for, I'm glad you filled us in, Mel, that you've presented this other times, because it sounded like an awful lot to prepare for just this group.
Well, like I said,
But
I presented this at my caller schools and my sessions as well, but in a very brief form. And every time I did, I was asked, "Oh, can you expand on that? Can you expand on that?" And in one session, what happened was we had a caller school which ran for an entire week, and we had 4 weekends that we were actually talking. They asked for a 5th weekend, an entire 3-day weekend, just to talk about this subject, which is still not enough. But what you've got there is just the synopsis of what is actually about a week's training of interviewing, debriefing, elicitation, social conflict resolution that goes to attaches, to field agents, to intelligence operators, to diplomats, all about dealing with conflict resolution in life and life situations and business, truncated into a 45 or a 50-minute presentation. So I realize it is very, very, very
do
fast, but it's something that's needed.
you ever do role playing in this kind of thing? Because that would be
Yep.
fun.
When we prepared to do human operations, traveling abroad, it's actually about 4 weeks, and then you're off to England, and then you're doing another 4 weeks in training there, and then you're doing resistance to interrogation. You're doing interviewing, debriefing, elicitation, conflict resolution, with all sorts of role playing situations, and it's it's a learning experience, and it's a lifelong learning experience. But
Oh,
one of the things that I would very, very strongly recommend to everybody is there's a group called Personality Insights. It's the DISC model of personality, behavior personality evaluation. It gives you a strong insight to look at yourself, but also dealing with others. And there's lots and lots of material on conflict resolution. It's a whole world unto itself, but it basically boils down to the stop principle for yourself, those principles of how to deal with it, and just the 10 common sense things to remember that I summarized at the end. If you can keep those in your mind and get them fresh and practice them, they're not only going to help you as a caller, but they're going to help you in everyday life.
as I was about to say, anyway, let's give a big round of applause to Mel for the presentation. I really appreciate it.
You can tell it's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, and what I generally ask people to when they present is, what are you passionate about? We hit the nail on the head here. The usual thing is, if you've only scheduled an hour for this, feel free to leave without without feeling embarrassed or needing to offend anybody. I would like to note that I've said this before, but I don't really follow the chat very often, but there's a lot of chat usually going on because people are asking questions along the way and what have you. And I notice there's basically no chat this time
Wow,
because,
that's the first.
well, there are 2 reasons. One is because everybody was really focused on what you were saying and didn't really want to have side chats, side conversations of conflict. Um, and the other is because you usually start the chats and you were busy talking. Sorry to pick on you. There's others that frequently start it too. Anyway, with that,
There's a couple of hands raised.
and yeah, I was going to say, oh, they're actually the little corners. I have to. Dan's supposed to be here looking at that. I think Clark, were you?
That's why I have Mark doing it in my sessions, because I miss it all the time too, Don.
I actually think that Zoom does them in order. So the first one on my top left is Stephen, and his hand was up first.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it was the other way. They pushed the most recent up there. Stephen, talk to us.
Mel was asking about the heads, face, grid, square, how you'd resolve it. I would see if they would want to workshop it a little bit and show them that you could have guys face grand square, and show them the different ways you could do it, as if they want to take a few minutes to workshop it a little bit.
But how are you're, which is absolutely true, but it's the issue is getting that person that's come up to the stage to diplomatically feel that they can back away from the stage, vindicated that their perspective is valid, and be willing to actually workshop than saying, well, yes, you can do it heads face, you can do it side, or you can even do boys face or girls face.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, is de-escalating.
Ask them if they'll look outside the box a little bit and want to try to experience it.
Yeah.
You know, it all depends on the situation, obviously. But in the case that Mel said, this was the last tip. He was putting all sorts of good stuff in, and he just ended with that. You're not about, on the last tip of the evening, start workshopping something that the other 5 squares did.
Ask maybe next time to do it. Next time we could workshop it or something.
Don picked up on something, which I was kind of hoping others would pick up on it. It is the last tip. I've been calling a great dance. Everything's going well. What did I do wrong?
You did it at the end and not at the beginning.
I put something in right at the end of the evening, even though everything was going fly, and oh, wow. And that dancer come up and said, that dancer was absolutely right. They're wrong in what their understanding was. They're wrong in the interpretation. They're wrong, but that dancer was absolutely right. I have done something wrong. I was the cause of that conflict, even though it wasn't any fault of mine other than bad judgment. So I've got to recognize that's what I did wrong. I says, you know what? You're absolutely correct. I should not have done that. It actually can be done like that, but you're absolutely correct. I should not have done that there. I'm really sorry for that. I can appreciate how that made you feel. Bang.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something my mentor, Jim Mayo, said many years ago to one of the schools I went to, was whenever there's a problem on the floor, and this is not a direct interpersonal conflict, but just seeing something stumble or what have you, it's your fault, you the caller. You either called something too difficult, you called it at the wrong time, your timing was off, you called the wrong level dance. Whatever the problem is, it's your fault. Try to, as Mel just said, try to figure out, or as Mel just pointed out, I missed when I pointed out it was the last step. Find out what you did wrong to make that problem happen. Clark?
I see resolution on a floor a lot. And one of the things that I always say, even if I'm not directly involved with it, if it is causing, is, hey, blame the caller. They get paid. And I make a joke of it, and it diffuses something because I go, what? And that's that interrupting the pattern. And suddenly you can get back on with it. And they'll come up and talk to you afterwards. Listen, you called something. I wasn't quite sure what it was. Sorry, go ahead, Don.
So it's frequently right, blame the caller. It's not always right, they get paid.
Clark, it's an expression.
Clark, go for it.
Actually, one of the callers in our area, when he made a mistake, would often say, it's only a hobby, which I thought was a poor way to cover up his problems, along the lines of, I get paid. A bunch of comments, but initially, how often do people encounter these situations as callers, needing to use some of these mechanisms? maybe not just a minor one, but a more major one. Obviously, I haven't had that problem in the last 2 years because I haven't been face to face with anyone calling in the last 2 years. And even before that, I would say more conflict that I faced was on mailing lists and written responses where you can, take your 3 deep breaths more by, even if you banged out a angry response, you don't hit send, you wait a day or two and then read it over and then wonder what really got you upset. What are you really trying to say? What do you want out of this interaction? Certainly slow emails allow you to do the steps you talked about in over a longer period of time rather than in real time when they're in your face. But back to my original thing, how often do we as callers face these situations? And maybe a more telling one is do some callers face them a lot more often than others? And do some callers handle them better than others?
Clark, as far as you running into these, I imagine you could tell some stories about Board of Governor meetings.
Oh.
I'm sure that's where some
I
leaders and opinions have different opinions.
I was just about to say that, not at Board of Governors meetings, but at Callers Association meetings or caller dancers or group association meetings, some very strong opinions come out. But that's a great question, Clark. I'd like to open up the floor before I respond to that, if I can.
I was going to say that I basically never have these issues. Hey, where's Daryl?
I don't know. He's not here this time either, and he's the usual.
I do miss him, but it's also a little bit of a joke.
Chris,
people think Daryl and I are in conflict all the time, but mostly we're really not.
Bill's had his hand up for a while, so unless yours is a direct comment about what Clark said, can you hold off? Welcome back, Stephen.
If nobody's going to comment,
yeah, my camera's not working.
I was going to comment, but I could barely hear it.
Oh. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, on Clark's point, I'm one of those callers I've been calling for 38 years now, so I'm not a newbie, but I've had this situation where once every 2 or 3 years, I'll have such an overwhelming internal conflict because of a situation I've had that it makes me want to not do it anymore. And I'm sure we've all experienced that from time to time. I had it both in my work career of 45 years, which I'm not doing anymore, and in calling. And it's one of those situations where I'm not one of those callers that happens every week. It happens once every 2 or 3 years. And it becomes so overwhelming that it kind of just eats me up for a long time and I just want to do it. So I don't know if that's where you're going with that. But on the point that causes that is something in Mel's presentation that I wrote down, because it's always been an issue that I've had as a caller and a human being all my life. Don't fear conflict. And that's the thing that I grew up with. I've always tried to avoid conflict. I never argue with people. I never try to do any of that my entire life. And I have to open myself up at age 67, almost 68, to try to accept that there will be conflict and that I need to resolve it in many of the ways that Mel talked about. So, but I agree with Clark. If it's happening a lot to callers that they're having a conflict weekly or monthly or whatever, they really need to have some internal inspection of what's going on with them.
I agree. What Chris said about him and Daryl is actually a very good point, because I had a lot of really fantastic mentors throughout my career in calling, and we went head to head on choreographic ideas, very strong opinions. And I know it's really, really hard to believe, but sometimes people can think I can actually be opinionated sometimes. Yeah, right. However, I have nothing but the utmost respect for all of these. Like Barry and I Barry started Behind the Mic magazine. I've written for Behind the Mic. I also co-edit that and do all the formatting for it. And we get into some really heavy discussions about some of the things that presented or how it should feel. And you'll actually see in some of those issues that he'll have a point of view and I'll have a point of view, and they're contradicting each other. We'll have a different color about the article that's being written in there. Some of the articles are contrary. Both of us, I have the greatest respect for Barry. Barry has, respect for me, and we also respect the opinions of the people that submit. Even if we may not agree with their opinion, their point of view is valid because it's a different perspective, and they're not we're not the only ones that have that perspective, and that's the reason for the magazine, other than experience in calling. In my calling career, I've had to deal with a few conflict situations. Luckily, I've only had one which was directed at me, but a lot of the times I'm, as the caller or as the leader, I've been actually asked as a visiting caller to a club to deal with a conflict situation in the club. And I know of a number of other callers that have had to deal with that. But what you said was absolutely correct. Association meetings, dancer association, recruiting association meeting, caller association meetings, when they're trying to decide who's going to be calling at the big dances, and they're excluding all of the newer callers because they're not ready yet, but they're not going to help them get ready. And that creates conflict. All of these situations arise in our circle of influence. And our circle of influence is a lot bigger than we tend to realize, even if we're a brand new caller. And you have to be able to say, what am I doing? What do I want? Where do I want this to be directed? And then diffuse it. And as you said, don't be afraid of conflict, but also that doesn't mean taking punishment. That doesn't mean getting walked up. Accept it. Yeah, there's a conflict situation. Here's my card. Send me an email, because if the guy is, excuse the language, but some people are assholes. And here's my card. Send me an email. Delete. I've done it. We've all done, not in square dancing, but we all have these conflict situations. And what I presented here is we did leading with emotional intelligence, which is something that directors and CEOs and everything else, they take this, but they actually take it at a lower level than what I'm actually presenting here. And these are our leaders in the world, and they just get a bit taste of pacifying platitudes, which is infuriating itself, pat answers dealing with situations. We as callers have to interact. So it's something, and it's a life skill. I think Yolanda had her.
Yolanda was next. Yeah, go ahead, Yolanda.
So I'll have to take my hand off.
We can hear you.
Okay, but I just lost my visual.
We can see you too.
Yeah, but I can't see you guys. Okay, go on to somebody else while I fix this.
Larry, what do you want to add to this while Yolanda is?
There.
He wants to see our reactions.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yep.
fine.
Good. Yeah. So one technique that I learned at work many years ago was a thing called mindfulness. You might have heard of that. You may not have heard about it. There's numerous books about it. I went to a seminar on it. To be honest with you, when I went, I thought it was basically bunk and wasn't going to, I thought it was sort of fake. I didn't think it really would ever work. And so I went to the seminar and practiced it. And now I've used it ever since. And it's a technique you use when you are starting to get angry or you're getting upset about something, to keep you calm, if that makes sense. It's a breathing technique and a concentration technique that allows you to calm yourself when you're starting to get upset. And I haven't had to use it at a dance, but I, sometimes use it at work when frustrating things happen. And I use it even in light cases where I'm just kind of annoyed and to try to keep calm. But it's called mindfulness, and It may help you in a club situation if you find yourself getting angry.
There's a writer, Joan Childs. She's got a few books published on just that, but essentially she also breaks things down into, I think, 5 or 10 steps. And it's essentially along the line of the same thing. You've got to be assertive without being argumentative. You got to be there in the moment. You've got to avoid lecturing somebody, which is what I tend to do a lot of the time. That's one of my biggest strengths, is I'm a good presenter, but it's also my biggest weakness, is I tend to get carried away and lecture a lot. But criticism, self-introspection, honesty, don't put those blames out. Mindfulness is a catchword that covers a lot of those things, but they deal with, as you're saying, introspection, looking at yourself, not being walked over, getting your opinion out, but validating their opinion. It deals a lot with interpersonal relationships, like partner relationships or business relationships. But as with any of these things, you can carry that on. And in square dancing, that's all we are, is a personal relationship. All of square dancing is a personal relationship. Either you as a caller, you as with a group, with an individual, with another dancer. Every time you get behind the mic, you have a personal relationship with each and every dancer on that floor. It's a communication exercise. And you've got to put all those things in. It's a great, great technique that you're talking about, Larry. And
Yeah.
absolutely. And it will apply to life in general if you can focus on it.
You know, the funny thing about mindfulness is it kind of needs to be practiced a little bit, because it's hard to, you know, like instantly change your focus, like on the spot. And so when you first do it, you might not be particularly good at it, but it's handy to practice it even by yourself.
Absolutely.
And then you get to where you can like automatically just kick it in at a moment's notice.
Absolutely.
So.
Almost every bit of conflict resolution says, don't try and find the conflict, but try and find a solution that you can both agree to. Sometimes that is walking away, but trying to find a solution. And if that person actually thinks that you're helping them find a solution to a conflict, you know, it's a great police technique, because police will often say to somebody that's being belligerent, there's only one person here that's actually listening to you and trying to help you out, and you want to yell at them? Is that really what you want to do? And it's such an interruption. Is that, and they just bang, I'm here to help you or to help resolve the situation. You want to yell at the only person that's here to help you? Is that really what you want to do? And they stop.
I kind of chuckle at that, because I can't picture a policeman using the walk away. So
you walk away. I'm not talking physically, but disassociating that yourself from that argument. It is such a powerful, powerful tool. Like for me, I've gone into situations armed and everything else, but my biggest tool was my notebook. You know, I'd take that out and say, oh, hang on a second. That's interesting. Let me write that down. And just, okay, can you just, slow down. I want to make sure I get what you say. I'll read this back to you when I'm done to make sure I got it right. I suddenly just stopped them. I said, I'm so interested in what you're saying that I'm going to write this down. I'm going to read it back to you. Is that right? Yeah, of course I'm gathering evidence from prosecution and whatnot, but they don't, you know, they suddenly feel so validated. It's amazing what can happen. You know, I had this one lady, it was an illegal dumping investigation, walked up, you know, here's this, I found all this, and I found a phone. I managed to get all the stuff up. There was a license, it was a personalized license plate. I tracked it back to her. After reading, you know, the Churat, you have the right, don't incriminate yourself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She picks up the phone and calls her boyfriend and says, you said they would never track this back to me. I asked you to get rid of this. You took that. I said, excuse me, you do know that I've actually, you know, read you this. You don't have to say or do anything. Oh, yeah, I know that, but this, and she was just screaming at him on the phone. Yes, I have to write this down. I said, well, hang on, he's got to write this down. And she says, I told you, you had to get. It was hilarious because she was so intent on getting her point heard. And she was so mad, and it just calmed her down. By it's bizarre what can happen sometimes.
Yolanda, did you get your system working?
Yes, I can actually see you guys again.
Excuse me 1 second. I'm gonna blow my nose.
I won't do the lower my hand until after I finish talking this time. So I'm gonna refer back to what Bill was saying about, you know, I've talked to other newbie callers and over the last couple of years and stuff, and I actually know several that have chosen to discontinue calling, not because of the calling itself, um, but because of what we're talking about, that they just couldn't handle it. They didn't know how to diffuse the situation, and it was eating them up. So, and to the point where they sold their equipment. So, and I know through Zoom, I know a variety of callers now. So it's like, um, it's amazing. Like if this setup that we have here now, I mean, um, we now have more support than we would have had pre-COVID. So, new callers need to learn these skills, and not everybody is good at it, you know? Um, One of the callers found out that I was really shy and put me behind the mic, and I have homework every week. And one of the homework topics was one week he said, "Okay, I'm not going to be here. You're going to be the host." And he didn't tell me he had a backup plan and, and stuff. But it was like, but he did it in steps. So first, I called, and then I was sort of co-host, and then the host, and it was like, okay, so what are you going to do if somebody asks you to substitute for them? How are you going to deal with that? So I'm sort of, somebody realizes I'm shy and is teaching me how to deal with certain situations, so that I have somebody there that, if necessary, can help me through it, but won't unless something happens that I can't deal with. So that's really fortunate. Not every new caller has that. And I also have a bunch of callers that I have emails for and stuff like that. And if I have something happening, I can email them and they can give me their perspective. I wouldn't have had that several years ago.
Absolutely.
So
As a helping hand, everybody is also invited to the next dance that Yolanda is calling at, because we're all going to go up and heckle her on the stage so she can practice her conflict resolution.
but it's really nice to be, because until somebody did that with me, I didn't know what was all involved. Like some of the behind the scenes stuff you don't realize, as a dancer, in the transition from dancer to being a caller, and how you need to deal with some of that kind of stuff. So it's a very good topic.
You raise a very valid point, Yolanda, and this goes to what Clark was asking earlier. In the last 3 years since I've been doing this and then doing the mentoring and whatnot beforehand, there's been about 17, 18 callers that have wanted to give up, have felt this frustration, have had conflict, not with dancers, but with other callers and usually teachers. When I started calling, and I started in Germany, granted, so it was a sort of an unrealistic scenario compared to the North American model. There was massive support, even to the point where there was a very, very good German caller who did not speak English. He knew I was having problems with something and problems with conflict. He actually arranged to have somebody to come and translate for him to assist me. Callers don't do that anymore. Sorry, not all callers do that anymore. Let me rephrase that. Since the early to mid 90s, the decline of square dancing has led to this cards close to the chest. You're going to steal my dancers. I'm afraid. Oh, I don't want you to become a better caller than I am because you'll steal all my dancers mentality. In a lot of places where callers are actually afraid of newer callers coming up that want to learn, and they will do everything that they can surreptitiously to provide support, but hinder that person's development. And as Yolanda said, of those 18, there's probably about 7 or 8 that have quit calling because they didn't want to deal with other callers that were doing this to them. And this is one of the reasons why this session, to me, is something that should be an important part of the caller curriculum. Should also be a whole day's training or a whole week's training just for everybody as a life skill in general. But it is something that if you're aware of and you can practice every day, just running it through your head, even what if scenarios, you'll be a much, much more capable person dealing with these things when they do come up, and recognizing in yourself that it's not you. It's the drama or their control drama or what they're afraid of.
It's I'm glad I was able to give you an hour or two to work on this. Unfortunately, I can't give you the week or two that you need to. Have you given this presentation on your series yet?
No, I have not. I was actually writing this. It was going to be part of my series, but when you asked me, I said, you know what? It's a great venue, and it's like I said, I encourage everybody to tune into yours, to tune into mine, and to tune in. We get more people reading on the OC Callers web pages, watching the sessions, downloading the documents, downloading the files, and it's phenomenal. It's the same with Behind the Mic magazine. We've had a couple callers associations actually call up and criticize because one time the issue was late, and one time we combined two issues because of things that are going on, and that happens. That's life. But they were actually scheduling their Callers Association meetings around the release of the magazine because that was one of the topics they were. And I mean, how flattering is that? But thankfully, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to produce a 50 to 60 page magazine every month. And to have that.
I used to produce a 10 page, I guess, newsletter, and meeting the deadline was not always possible.
No, and it's not. And trying to find new aspects of stuff to deal with.
I didn't realize
that's a bit of a digression from conflict resolution, but it is something that I think, and I was ever so happy when I put this out. Somebody put that at Caller Lab this year. They actually had a session dealing with conflict resolution, and to the best of my knowledge, other than talking about it, or like Mike Seastrom gives a great presentation on communication and dealing with people and how you feel. Don, you've done a great presentation on all those things that can affect a dance, and things that you can only control is what you can control, not the moon, not the phase, not the, all those things. But to the best of my knowledge at Caller Lab, this is the first time somebody actually presented about, hey, people are sometimes difficult to deal with. How do you deal with them? Well, you deal with them by start dealing with yourself. And I'm so glad to see that. I've been trying to get this onto curriculums other than what I teach for over 20 years now.
Let's move on to Clark. His hand is getting tired.
So since you mentioned it, the Caller Lab board meetings, what I've been told that I do that people appreciate, and is so it's run with Robert's Rules of Order. So there's usually one topic on the table for discussion, and there's 25 of us, and different people raise their hand and say their side of this, and they say that, and it goes back and forth. And sometimes it wanders, but usually the chair keeps it focused. Is I just sit back and listen to all of it, hopefully with an open mind, certainly having an opinion of maybe what I think, or maybe it's something I don't really care much about. And then near the end, when the discussion's winding down, I kind of say, I heard this and I hear this, and I agree with this side, but I'm not sure that this makes sense in our situation, and kind of summarize and then offer my opinion if I have one at the end. But kind of show, I guess, that I've taken it all in, I've digested it. Often people are very long-winded in their opinions, so a summary at the end of where we've been maybe helps, and people seem to find that a useful service.
Absolutely.
I will say that in meetings and voting on stuff, I'm often concerned that as long as one person in the room can offer one good reason to vote for something, everyone will hang on to that and vote for it, even if I think it's like the wrong direction to go on. Like, as humans, we seem to be just looking for that one way we can hang on to something. And you can think of that in politics and stuff also. So from a engineering, computer sciencey, logical let's evaluate all the stuff and figure out where we really should be going. Just having a reason to vote on one particular side isn't always good enough for me, but it seems to be good enough for many people. I'll just throw that out.
I'd like
Clark,
to confirm what Clark said about his, not only at Board of Governors meetings. I don't believe we served on the board at the same time, unless there was maybe a slight overlap at the end. No, but just meetings in general, online, caller lab groups, our Callers Association in general. Clark does sit back, summarize, and does a great job of summarizing what's happened and helping people see things clearly. Thank you for that. Adding that to our group activity. Larry.
One of the things that you mentioned there, Clark, is absolutely correct. In many situations, especially in a situation where you have a control panel or a control group, such as a board meeting, any kind of executive meeting, Caller Lab is probably one of the greatest examples of it. When you walk into a room, I don't know how many times I've heard this story of, I went to my first Caller Lab meeting and there was, Pappy Shaw, and there was Jim Mayo, and there was blah, 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 and here's all the greats. I remember going to my first ECTA meeting and there was, wow, these are the guys I'm idolizing. These are the guys that I'm taught. There's this, he's the guy that wrote part of the Plus program. And I'm going, I'm not going to say a word. They call for a vote. Yeah, you've got to vote. And I've seen this so many times. Don Beck is there. Don Beck is making a presentation on mental image calling. And Don Beck is just going to prove a point about sheep. Don Beck says, mental image calling is very, very simple because you have an X and you have an O. And all you have is you got two X's makes an O. If you've got one O and one X, it's a zero. And anything times zero is zero, and it's there. It cancels it out. So you can call an X and an O and the square will resolve 100% of the time. Now, we both know that's wrong, correct? But Don Beck said that. And every new caller is going to go, so let's take a vote on this. This is going to be the new system. Yep. And they'll wait to see if Don's hand goes up, and then their hands will go up and they'll follow like sheep in line. And what you're saying, Clark, is absolutely correct. People will wait to see if somebody's got the valid opinion. I said this about lawyers the other day. I was having a discussion, and it was about legislation, totally unrelated to this, but there was a conflict about environmental legislation. And they were getting legal opinions from different people. And one person said this, and one person said that. And I turned around and I said, this is what the legislation says. This is how the legislation's interpreting it. You've got a judge up there. The judge doesn't really care about legislation. The judge cares about the sale. And that's what lawyers' jobs are. They don't care about right or wrong. They're selling a product. Their product is what their client wants them to sell, whether it's right or it's wrong. And the best salesman usually wins, and they use legislation to prove their argument. Well, that's what Caller Lab is like in a lot of cases. The person with the strongest opinion or the most validated opinion and reputation that makes the best argument usually wins, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. And I think you can attest to that sometimes. The ARC is a perfect example of that, because how many times do we have, here's our knowledgeable people making a decision, and the next committee says, you know what, we were wrong on that because this situation. And then they'll come back, you know what, we were actually right on that. But what they do is they make the best decision they can from their point of view and their perspective at the time. The nice thing about some of these organizations, especially the ARC, is give them new facts, they'll step back and reconsider. And that's what Clark was saying he does. In this, look at that, summarize, and then, oh, wow, this guy actually listened to us. This guy made sense. This guy made sense. Of course he made sense. He's telling you what you just told him. That makes sense to me. Oh, I've listened. He's listened to I better listen to what he's saying because he's making sense right now. And you can drop your little eggshells in there. And it's great. And it's a fantastic technique, Clark. Absolutely fantastic.
And that gets back to a kind of a second thing, which is when you're having a discussion or an argument or whatever, be it technical or maybe political or whatever, I'm always interested in how many people in that discussion will ever change sides? Some people are so stuck on their point of view that what's the point of me arguing this and you arguing that if neither of us is ever going to change our point of view? Why are we even having the discussion?
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in how many people come into certain situations either with an open mind or a potentially changeable mind. And yeah.
There is an expression on that, and it deals with statement analysis, which is a whole different thing. But a very, very quick synopsis of it is, if you say to me, I believe that this is this way. Okay, so I believe that you can call heads, face, grand, square. Or you're looking at it, I've just looked it up and I think you can call heads, face, grand, square. You are saying two completely different things. I believe means this is my position, it's my belief. It's very hard to change a belief. I think means I'm rationalizing based on the information I know. Now that's a very, very simplistic way of looking at statement analysis, but that's exactly what you're talking about is I believe versus I think. And beliefs are very, very difficult to change.
You reminded me of a thing I observed many years ago. Larry, thanks for hanging in there. But while Mel was talking about, if somebody of authority says something, you tend to believe them. Many years ago at Caller Lab convention, back when there were larger groups and there was some overall problem that should be discussed, they had something right after the general meeting on Mondays, say Monday afternoon, and they would generally break the group into two different sessions so that half could hear, say there'd be two problems, and one half would go to these guys presenting this and the other go to this, and then the audience would switch, or the lecturers would switch. And I sat in on one. I won't mention the gentleman's name, but he's a very prominent and very influential and charismatic speaker. And I saw him on the first presentation where he was leaning towards one side of should we do this or should we do that, and taking a straw vote at the end of and he wasn't the only one speaking up there and the discussion and everything. And at the end of the session, they took a straw vote as to how, people felt. Should they go left or should they go right? And they all went in the same direction he went. In the next session, where he was talking to a totally different group on the same topic, he leaned to the right instead of the left. And the straw vote at the end all went to the right. And many years after that, I confronted him saying, I saw what you were doing with manipulating people. And he said, oh, you caught me, huh? But it was interesting to see what influence he had, and confirming many years later that it was intentional, just to see what he could do to a group. Scared the heck out of me, actually. Larry?
Manipulating a group is actually a lot easier than manipulating an individual.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, Don, that sounds like a Jack Lazary, actually, to me. But thank goodness he got chained down the line on the list single-handedly. So
well,
I'll give him credit for that.
It wasn't Jack.
Yeah, right.
Because Jack just went in one direction, and I agree. We spoke about this privately before, but no, it was somebody else who led people in a different direction. It was early in Caller Lab, not the final vote.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, getting back to interactions at the club level, one thing that I recognize, especially since I moved to Colorado, is that people they're raised in different parts of the country, and so they have certain cultural ideas about how you interact, and so for example. Some of my dancers, are from the Northeast, and they're very blunt. I mean, that's a little bit too generalistic, but we'll just say them specifically, those specific dancers. They're very blunt about, the things they say, whereas my dancers, that are from other parts of the U.S. are way more gracious, when they communicate. So, you can, if you're not aware of that, you might consider, bluntness a conflict. But the person is that's just the way they have always been. And they don't mean it any more differently than the person being gracious about it.
Mel
So-
said that not only with the way they speak, but with eye contact. It's a cultural.
Right. Yeah. So, and the other thing too, people that have a little bit of, well, let's just say they don't care for your calling. We'll just make it that way. When you're a new caller, some people will just tell you point blank, I don't care for your calling. But oftentimes, after you've called for a few years, this is when you're a new caller. When you've called for a few years, they grow to like your calling. So don't be discouraged if people aren't too keen on what you're doing. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is just people in your club, their general bluntness versus others who are so nice and when they want to complain about something, they kind of package it. I can tell they've really thought long and hard about how they're going to say it.
Sandwich.
Yeah, that's right. And so they're going to try to say it to you where it doesn't even seem like a complaint, even though it is. But those are, that's fine. That's fine. I think we have to, be aware of both people, who are communicating with us and understand where they're coming from.
It is one of the things that happened to me just very recently, and it's a cultural awareness thing, is with the use of terminology in Australia compared to North America. Like an abrupt, when I was growing up, at least in Canada, an abrupt change is a sudden change of direction. It just happens suddenly, and we were dealing with our real estate agent, our builder, because we're building a house, and she was talking about one thing and then she goes to another thing. And I said, oh, you're very abrupt, these changes going on. And my wife looked at me in absolute shock, because that's the common term of abruptness. It's a sudden change directions. But to say something's abrupt here means very rude and disrespectful, which is also a meaning of abrupt. It's just, that's not the way I think of it. An abrupt change. I liked it because they're succinct to the point, change the topic, move on. I appreciated that. Well, my wife took it as an insult.
I've had friends and relatives in and out of the square dance field that it takes you a while to be able to tolerate their frankness. But once you realize what they do and who they are and how they speak, it's great to know what they're thinking, because they just say it, as opposed to getting upset by it. And as opposed to other people that are honeycoating things so that you really aren't sure where they're coming from. So once you learn people, it's a lot easier. I want to change the subject slightly here. Mel, I just want to give you a couple of critiques on what you've been doing. One is your background picture. I go back and forth beside deciding whether your head is in a fishbowl or whether you have a halo on. Lean back a little bit and we'll see better. Yeah. And the other thing is,
Don, I was thinking that also. So yeah.
So did you come up with halo or fishbowl?
I was thinking halo a little bit. Yeah.
I was thinking fishbowl for the longest time. The other thing, Mel, is your
How's
lighting.
that?
You've lost your halo, but we still love you. And the other thing is the reflections of probably your screen on your glasses is half the time we can't see your eyes. It just see the bright lights. And I've been noticing probably the majority of people here have glasses on, but don't have that reflection problem. I'd like to see your eyes when you're talking.
Hang on a second. I'll see if I can fix that.
How's that for changing the subject, guys?
Is that any better?
Again,
Not really.
Depends on what your head is.
No, not really.
my solution is even though normally I use these when I'm using the computer, I just don't look at
Well,
all the focused points.
the problem I have with the glasses, I developed glaucoma, very like sudden onset glaucoma. And so I can see great, but if I don't think you can see me here. Can you see me here?
Sort of now and then.
Yeah, I can actually read the screen. I can read the small text in the chat from back here, but I have to speak up. But up here, I can't see crap.
I figured I could get away with this after an hour and 3/4, but anyway, back on topic? Are there any other back on topic comments? Clark?
So I kind of don't believe the communication is only, 7% or whatever that really small percent is in actually what we're saying, and so much in body language and whatever. I hear that. I haven't researched it. I do know that intonation matters. Certain languages, it matters a lot more. I've been watching some videos, and some of the videos are, here's 15 things you can say in other languages that we can't say in English. And you're like, how can there be stuff we can't say in English? But then you look at what the languages do and how different languages give directions. There's fascinating stuff there. But you did have a point about, saying it with a smile, have a smile on your face and so forth. And I don't know if people are familiar with the phrase resting bitch face, which is some people's natural demeanor when they just sit there and are listening or paying attention looks like they're pretty unhappy and upset with you. And we don't have many people on the screen right now, but when we'd had more like 20 or whatever, and people are paying attention to you talking, if we have the full grid up, it's interesting to look at different people's face or disposition to see whether, is that a person who's happy, sad, frustrated, or whatever? And they might just be concentrating, and yet they look, not approachable. So if you happen to,
my wife says that to me all the time.
well, you look kind of more like a straight line. I was noticing that Bill Eiler actually kind of looks like a frown when he's just, sitting there. And if you Google resting bitch face and look at just the images that Google gives you, you'll see hundreds of examples of where, these people's faces just don't communicate what's going on in their brain and behind their eyes. And I guess as callers, we should be aware of what persona demeanor we put out there when we're interacting with people.
You are absolutely correct on that, Clark. My wife says this to me all the time. I was taught very, very early to have a neutral expression, especially in my career and what I was doing in my career, and then to adapt my expression to whatever the situation is. And, I can be in with, the Prime Minister's office with royal family. I could be down in the gutter, and I'll blend into whatever environment I happen to be into because I was trained to do that. But in my natural life, it's like my kids don't want to go to the movies with me because they went to Batman one time. I take them to Batman. I wanted to watch the movie. So I'm sitting there and I'm actually listening to the dialogue, and they keep talking to me. Come home. They didn't want to go to movies with me ever again because I want to watch the movie. That's not what they go to the movie. It's things like that. My wife is the same way. And how people communicate and how they express, you are absolutely correct. And I'm one of those people. I actually have to practice and mentally teach myself and constantly keep myself in check because I have very much a resting bitch face. It's a very neutral expression. I can sit there like this and I'm having a great time. Or I'm focused on the movie or I'm focused on work. My expressions don't change all that much. So I have to really, really sometimes overemphasize. As to your second point, yeah, a lot of people have a hard time with those figures, 7%, 38%, and 55%. But believe it or not, those figures are very, very, very well researched. In the UK, they actually did this where they, massive exercise. They had a radio presenter, a TV show, and a newspaper, and they just put words in the paper, and then they put it on radio with inflection, and they put it on TV, and they were doing the studies, and these have been done in psychological studies, everything else. And it's like reading a book. If you really want to get into it, if you look at when you're reading a book, you don't read the words. You start reading, and if you start reading it aloud, you put intonation in your voice because you're presenting something completely different to the audience you're reading. But when you read a book, how often do you actually see that book unfolding in your mind? All the reactions, you build these pictures. And this is what the body and the mind will psychologically do. And it's like there's whole studies in behavioral symptom analysis and things like that. But if I can do a very simple exercise here. Okay, yep. Actually, we'll use you, Clark. Okay, just watch me for a second. Now, I'm going to make you look up and to the left. Okay, so just hold up your left hand so we all know where you're looking. Okay, okay. So the day before you got married, what dress was your wife wearing?
No clue.
Okay. Now, notice he's staring at the camera. But what did he do with his head? No clue. And that's up to the left. There's the visual. Couldn't remember it. Up and to the right. I've got to picture it back neutral. Now we're going to make you look over to the left. Oh, sorry, over to the right. Over to the right. Okay. Your favorite contraband, what would they sound like playing Def Leppard's Heavy Metal Symphony?
Yeah, I don't know.
You all see it? And these are called eye accessing cues. So top left, this is visual recall. This is visual construction. This is audio recall. This is audio construction. So audio, as soon as I said your favorite contra group, over to the left, okay, I'm listening, and then I'm visualizing, and I'm listening again. What would they sound like? Oh, wait a minute. I got to build this picture in my mind of what it is. These are, a lot of people say, deception indicators. If you want introspection, have you ever noticed that psychiatrists, whenever they're talking to you, they have you always lay facing them on a couch? And then they usually have their notes and they rest something on their clipboard or their notepad down on their knee because it draws your eyes down there. Okay, that's kinesthetic. That approaches the emotive part of your brain to look down and to the right. But if I wanted to have a dialogue, if I want you to look to the bottom left, everybody think for a second, what's the 7th letter of your name? Oh, you can really see it on Yolanda there and on, because now what you're doing is you're actually spelling it out and you're having that internal dialogue.
Actually, I knew I only had 6 letters, but.
But you got a middle name. And there it is.
5 letters in that.
And knowing these kinds of things, and then body language, like people sit like this. This is not a defensive reaction. It can be a defensive reaction, but it's not a barrier. Some people are just comfortable like this. What you're looking for in all of these body languages and all these behavioral symptom analysis is not this, oh, he's looking up to the right, he's lying. No, he's not lying. He's just building a picture. What if I gave you 6 coat hangers and 10 pipe cleaners, what would you make out of them? I don't know. I've got to build something in my mind. It's not a lie. What you look for is triangles. And when the triangles of what you say, how you say it, and what you do when you say it all match, you've got something that's truth. If you've got, when they don't all match, it doesn't necessarily mean they're lying. It just means there's more questions to ask in the story, because they may not remember that. They may have to build it up. And those are techniques that you can use. And there's lots of stuff. And that takes weeks and weeks and weeks just to learn the basics of that. But those are some simple things that go on to learning how to understand people and learning about their culture. And women are much better than this because women generally deal with children, and children are absolutely, did you take that cookie? No. I'm trying to cover my mouth. I want to separate myself from that lie, guys, the collar pull, where were you last night? Oh, I was out bowling, whatever. So all of those things is not the conflict, is not the deception. There's more to that story that you want to be heard. And that's what open questions are about. And once they feel they can trust you to get it out, conflict goes away.
A couple of comments along this line. One is, if you want to not learn more, but just be interested in people's reactions when they're thinking or telling lies or what have you, and be entertained at the same time. There's a great series on TV called Lie to Me, where a group of people,
I love that show.
Yeah, where people basically, a group is hired to observe people and tell which ones are lying and which ones are telling the truth, hired by lawyers and this other thing. Quite entertaining and makes you aware of a lot of this stuff that Mel's talking about. The other
also
thing,
a comedy show is Would I Lie to You? Or Would I Lie to You? It's a comedy show that does the same thing, where people tell the most outrageous lies.
The other thing, and I was trying to look on the other screen here and I couldn't find it quickly, but my daughter is an ESL teacher, and teaching English is a difficult thing because of all the exceptions constantly. And when I see things that I have to sympathize with her, I sent recently I saw it online someplace, but I can't find it now. It was a 5 or 6 word sentence that when you emphasize any one of those 5 words in the sentence, it had a totally different meaning, 5 different meanings, just by emphasizing, so reading it on the page was whatever you wanted, or from context for the rest of the situation. But it was amazing how just emphasizing the word when you said it out loud, each word in the sentence gave it 5 different meanings. It was pretty amazing.
Yep.
Cece had her hand up and then took it down.
That's because my animals were being really noisy. I'm out in the milking goats. I was gonna attest to the resting bitch face thing, because I am one of those. If I'm just completely relaxed, people think I'm mad and ready to kill somebody. So when I was younger, I had a friend say, "You're never happy," and I'm like, "Okay, you relax and look in the mirror and see what your face looks like." And she had, slightly upturned lips. She always looked like she was smiling, even when she was upset. And I was the complete opposite. So when I started calling, immediately, I'm like, okay, so in order to interact as a caller at all, I am going to have to be smiling. And the first few nights of doing it, my face hurt so much from making myself not be relaxed, but forcing a smile all the time. My face was so sore from it. It was amazing, because people interpret that resting face as anger, discontentment. You're upset with them, and all of this. So I personally have to sit and smile the entire night so people don't think I'm mad.
A lot of people are like that.
I found out that my face is kind of like that in junior high school, and the yearbook came out. Now, I was a quiet person in the yearbook. People didn't really know me, so everybody's picture in there had a little tag under it, and mine was smiley, which I realized I didn't know that I was the only thing they could think about from me. And I keep, I agree with Cece that it's important to smile, because when you're smiling, I think my section on presentation said, if you smile, it's contagious and it comes through. And the way I do it when I was calling was I would have a picture of my son with a very infectious smile, and every time I'd look down, it'd remind me to smile. But I like to chant things like, let's see, smile is with the ends up, isn't it? It just helps me.
What you're talking about is what they call the mirror neurons, but you're absolutely correct. A smile, they say a smile is infectious, but that's exactly what it is. It triggers neurons in the brain that causes you to smile.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I've been observing it's not only a human trait, but a lot of animals, dogs in particular, you can tell when they're smiling
Oh,
and when they're
absolutely.
not. It's amazing. And it's wonderful to see a good smile.
You piqued my curiosity, Don, with the 5 sentences. I got thinking, I said, well, okay, a sentence with 5 words, pretty much any sentence with 5 words. Like if I say, Don is driving to Collar Lab. Okay, I go, Don is driving to Collar Lab. 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 Don is driving to Collar Lab.
Perfect.
Every one of those has,
perfect
you know,
example.
and that's just inflection. But and so Don is driving to Collar Lab. Don is driving to Collar Lab. Don is driving to Collar Lab. The whole thing changes with body language, with everything, and it's a fascinating field of study. I mean, if you ever get there or get the opportunity to take these courses or even go online and just read about it, it's absolutely fascinating. But my favorite anecdote, you know how I had on my slide, being nice and manipulative. It's also a great tool, but it's also you can really be a dick with this tool. And I was. When I was in Ottawa, I was calling about 5 nights a week. And I was actually making pretty good money at it. And I was in the Army at the same time, and I was making pretty good money at that too. And I wanted to rent a vehicle for calling that I could use on my taxes. So I had this vehicle. I went to the car dealership, and car dealers, they take behavioral symptom analysis, but just the very basics. And they look at, okay, so and that means I'm thinking, okay, that's a positive. Oh yeah, that's a negative. That's, and if they see it and they know what you're doing and you change this, oh yeah, I'm positive. Oh, wait a minute, that's a negative. They sweeten the deal just to the point where you're going to make the deal because they're reading your body language. Well, I was teaching this at the time and practicing this at the time and doing all this at the time. And I was trying to get a vehicle, and I ended up with a vehicle and a contract, which was, I think, $750 a month, which was the leasing arrangement on it. For $450 a month, I had a bumper to bumper warranty. Everything was covered on this vehicle from back to front, including the electrical, including the warranty, including the replacement and everything. And it was a great deal. And I had it signed, says, well, yeah. Well, if you can put that on paper, I'm going to come back. I just want to think about it. I'm going to come. Absolutely. And he had really worked, and you could tell he was brand new at the training. I came back 2 days later when I knew he wasn't working. And I said, I'd like to go with the contract because I knew there was no way the car dealership would honor this. But I had a contract. So I ended up getting a Ford Windstar, which was a really, really good vehicle. And they threw a whole bunch of stuff in to get out of this deal that this guy promised me. Where it worked out, and that was just me manipulating his body language in his training. I ended up writing the vehicle off in a motor vehicle accident. It was an ice storm in Ottawa, and I plowed into the side of a public transport bus because I just stopped on the hill and I just slid all the way down the hill. Nothing I could do about it. Anyway, I went to the dealership, and the guy was there. He said, oh, well, don't worry. We can get you. There was no, are you okay? Is everybody okay? It was, we can get you another car right away, which pissed me off. But what happened was, doing all this, I got out of my lease, but as it turned out, because of everything they gave me on warranty and was paid for, they actually owed me money, about $2,500. But I owed them to get out of the lease, about $1,000. So I just said, well, why don't we just call it even? And they were happy with that. But that's the power of actually knowing that.
Are you trying to tell me that we aren't supposed to believe a thing you said for the last 2 hours?
No.
You've been manipulating us?
I could be, but it's like, it's just like what I'm doing right now. I mean, we could do all sorts of things. And I don't know if you've been watching Don, but I've been doing this to him all night.
I find watching myself that I can't sit still. I'm moving around, doing things.
I know it's like you do this, and then you do
paying attention. So,
and this is mirroring, and if you want to bring somebody into you mirror what they are, and you come down. And there's little techniques, intimate space. Do you understand what I mean about intimate space? People like a certain distance. They don't like great big distance, but there's a personal communication space. Then there's an intimate space. One of the greatest tricks that was ever taught me by a square dance caller is the first thing you want to do with a new dancer is invade their intimate space and then give it back to them. And you do that with a handshake. You just lean up. Hi, how are you? Greeting. There's that. You create an intimate space and then you back off just a little bit past that personal conversation phase and watch it. They will close up to you to create that personal relationship because you've already been intimate with them without being intimate with them. And it's a great technique. It's a great trick. Greeting everybody at the door creates that intimate relationship with you and the dancer. Even though you may never speak to that person at all the rest of the night, you've already got an intimate relationship with them. And it's a great tool. It's a great technique.
You're creepy.
Yeah, I know. When I do this, like I explain this to my kids, or when I teach this, even in the military, a lot of people get very, very scared because they think, what is this? And they never know if I'm playing games with you or not, but it's not what I'm doing. Like I do that when I was doing interrogation or this kind of stuff, or teaching resistance to interrogation. But to actually get people to understand that these are tools, getting past that fear is the hard part.
As far as doing it to everybody you meet, my wife, Gail, is a psychologist. And when I bring people to meet her for the first time, they say, is she going to analyze me? And my typical answer is, she only does that when you pay her. That puts them at ease.
I had a boss at work, and we had a general manager, and they said, oh, have you met? I says, nope. And they said, oh, well, you got to watch this. And just from hearing a couple of things, I said, okay, well, I've never met this man. Well, okay, but I can tell you what his office looks like. What? I says, yeah, he's got his desk there. It's sitting here. He's got probably 3 pictures on the side wall, all of a diploma. He's got his back to the window. It's facing out. He's got a picture of his wife or family on the desk, but they're facing out towards you, not towards him. His desk is clean. He's got an in basket. He's got an out basket. He's probably got a wooden bookshelf on the right side, and it's all stacked neat, but he's got a full set of volumes of one type of material. It doesn't matter if it's related, but it's a full colored volume. And it's, oh, you've been in his office. No, they described his personality. General Schwarzkopf, we did a personality profile on him. It was something that was done that he wanted done, so that not because he needed to know himself, but he made sure that all of his senior officers and all of his staff had a copy of his personality profile, because doing that also says not only who you are, but how you like to be dealt with. And he was not a person for small talk and chit chat. If you wanted to talk to him, you walked into him, you say, here's the problem we have. Here's a possible solutions. What's your decision? And that's what he liked. He says, okay, here's an issue. Here's some options. I'm in command. I'll make a decision. And if it's the right decision, great. If it's a wrong decision, you say, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. It's that simple, black and white. I recommend the book Huckleberry Finn. Or is it Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer? Anyway, the one where they got to whitewash the fence. It's an example that I use in my training, because if you want to whitewash the fence, you get 4 people that don't want to help. One is a very strong, dominant person. Another person is a guy that just wants to party and have fun. Another person is very quiet, shy type, always there, but doesn't really do anything. And the other person is, Mr. Spock. None of them want to paint the fence, but if you want to get them all doing, I'll go up to Don. Don, you're going to be my high control. I want to be in charge guy. Hey, Don, I got to paint the fence. I got 4 other people and whatnot, but man, I need somebody to control. You're really good with this, people. Can you give me a hand with this? Don's going to go, great. 4 people. I'm in charge of painting the fence. I go up to Clark, and Clark is a dot the I, cross the T. Yeah, Clark, I got 4 people painting the fence. I got 6 gallons of paint, and I think it'll probably take me 4 hours to do that. Clark will say, how big is the fence? Oh, it's 25 meters. Well, you're going to need 12 gallons of paint. You're going to need 6 people. It's going to take this. No, I don't. Clark's going to be there just to prove me wrong. Okay. Yolanda, I'll go up and say, oh, Yolanda, oh man, I know I really appreciate all the help you give. I got to paint this fence, and I could really use your hand. you're so good at it. Well, she's got accolades. This is how I like to be approached. Somebody recognizes my value. She's there. I go up to Chris. Chris is just a party animal. Hey, Chris, I want to paint the fence. I really wanted to go out for a drink and party tonight, but tell you what, give me a hand painting this fence and I'll buy the first round. All Chris hears is party. He's buying. Sure, I'll be there to paint the fence. I've just approached everybody the way they like to be approached, and they're all doing what I want them to do. They're painting the fence and I'm sitting back enjoying a cold one, watching Clark prove me right, watching Don be in charge, Yolanda being, helpful, and Chris looking forward to the party at the end of it. That's all there really is to it. Meeting people where they want to be met and giving what they need in a situation. Anyway, it's an interesting study. If you get the chance, do your research on it. It will do nothing but help you in your life.
Mel, what's your topic for your discussion later?
I'm going to be talking about not how to resolve, but understanding the actual resolution process. I noticed this, and it was actually brought up as something that I had completely overlooked by a brand new caller. It was brought up to me. It says, everybody's talking about the friends and enemies or the box resolution or crams or mental image and how to control the squares. But what's the process that takes us to that point to choose? And I thought, you're absolutely correct. You have to really understand what you want to achieve before you learn the steps to achieve that. So I'm going to be talking in general about the resolution process. And then next week, Wendy Vandermeulen from Ottawa is going to be joining us, and she's going to be talking. The thing she gave me was say no to square dance lessons. Now, how's that for controversy? And it's a great topic because what she's done is she started a group. They just get together once a month. She's just started this out, but how to set this up. And it's anybody walk in, leave with a positive feeling about square dancing rather than this flavored then misperception of square dancing. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say about that.
Sounds good. Clark, what's your next? No, I won't keep people on the spot. I'm thinking it's time though that we've worn this subject out, and
I'll send the slides and the notes to Dan and to Mark as well, and they'll be up on the OC Callers webpage.
And hopefully that I didn't miss too much on the recording at the beginning. Other than my flaky introduction, it shouldn't be too bad. I think with your first slide. Anyway, thanks again, Mel. It brought up a lot of conversation, which is what we're all trying to do. You
pointed out something to me too. I was going through all the backgrounds, and almost every one of them, even the background looks like I have a halo or sun shining down on my head. I went, oh, that's interesting. Never noticed that before.
I almost put something about, this was about communications, and you're one of the few callers I didn't communicate with about how I should introduce you, but I pulled enough facts off of the web. You can't hide things. Hopefully I didn't miss too much.
If you Googled my name, you'll probably see it in conjunction with a whole bunch of things.
Well, no,
we've made I remember when I gave a talk at a weed seminar. I was presenting on water hyacinth at one of the state weed conventions. And it was dealing with control and methodology. I had become a biosecurity officer and a weeds inspector for council. And I realized when I got here, when I talk about learning, blackberry is an invasive weed here. Water hyacinth, lantana, all these things are really, really terrible weeds in Australia. But when I got here, we pulled up all this rosemary in the front garden, and my wife likes bushy green plants with purple flowers. Oh, Patterson's curse. It's a very invasive weed. Oh, beautiful bushy fling with nice clusters of flowers. Lantana. She had blackberries in the back. I dug them all up and planted them in a row. And our backyard and our front yard, I had turned into basically a noxious weed presentation template. And then ironically, I became a weeds inspector. And I learned after the fact, but that was actually how I was introduced at the weed seminar was, I've actually learned this. I planted all this, and so people do their research.
people say you should learn by your mistakes.
I'm just happy that I'm of the age where all of the young and stupid things I did was before the internet was there.
Oh, well.
Anyway, thank you very much for having me. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this subject, and I do like it, and I'm always available.
We'll have you talking about weeds invasive invasive weeds, invasive square dance. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging around, and we will see you next week with something or other. I haven't got somebody that, and there's a real Chris there. Take care, guys. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.